The American Descendants of the Enslaved: History by the Equal Justice Institute. Revelations.Unveiled. Detroit. The American Descendants of Slaves: History. The Freedmen'S Bureau. In March 1865, Congress established the Freedmen's Bureau to provide formerly enslaved people with basic necessities and to oversee their condition and treatment in the former Confederate states. In practice, the Bureau often fell short at this vast and historic undertaking, as white mobs and institutions throughout the South continued to oppress, attack, and exploit. Served as central community locations to document reports of violence committed against free people, register Black people to vote, verify labor contracts between formerly enslaved people and employers, provide food and medical care, establish schools, and perform marriages. The offices often face both internal and external impediments to carry out these functions. Many of the Bureau's difficulties began when it was established as a division of the War Department and authorized to operate for only 1 year after the war's end. Congress appropriated no budget for the Bureau and instead left its staffing and funding to the military, an institution ill-suited for the task of overseeing the complex social restructuring required to counter the effects of centuries of enslavement and entrenched racial hierarchies. Some lawmakers proposed making the Bureau a permanent, independent agency or making it part of the Interior Department, but those ideas met bipartisan opposition. In 1866, President Johnson vetoed Congress's first attempt to extend the Bureau's operations beyond 1 year. The measure was rewritten and passed over a second veto. Bureau offices were poorly staffed and under-resourced, unable to cope with the numerous needs of formerly enslaved people, still facing widespread violence and discrimination alongside the trauma and poverty born of generations in bondage. The Bureau Commissioner's Office was responsible for overseeing operations in the entire former Confederacy with a staff of just 10 clerks. As of 1868, the Bureau had only 900 officials to serve millions of formerly enslaved people across the South. Local Bureau offices quickly became targets for racist violence. Many white people in the South saw the Bureau as a symbol of unjust federal occupation and resented that federal officials were working to assist formerly enslaved people while Southern white Southerners greatly hindered the Bureau's ability to enforce federal laws by denying its authority. When women brought a case against a white man named Maynard Dyson in Virginia, in 1866. He ignored the Freedmen's Court's summons and refused to comply with the court's order that he compensate the women. Dyson's attitude was common, and strained resources rendered the Bureau largely powerless to force compliance. In many instances, white Southerners' disregard for the Bureau escalated to violence against schools and teachers that educated Black children. In 1869, a white mob burned down a freedmen's school in Clinton, Tennessee. A teacher later explained in a letter to the Bureau that days before the fire, the school had raised the American flag to celebrate the recent presidential inauguration of former Union General Ulysses S. Grant. Bureau records document many attacks on schools, including in Travis County, Texas, Queens Anne County, Maryland, and Rockbridge County, Virginia. In 1868, the white owner of a Clarksville, Tennessee building that freed people wanted to use for a school declared that he would rather burn it to the ground than rent it for a nigger school. In the face of waning political will to protect Black people's lives and rights and under growing political pressure from the South, Congress unceremoniously dismantled the Freedmen's Bureau in 1872, 7 years after the war's end, 5 years before the end of Reconstruction and the height of deadly violence targeting African Americans. Today, the Bureau's records supply some of the most detailed descriptions of the Reconstruction era, while also documenting the agency's own shortcomings and failures. The passing of a great human institution before its work is done leaves a legacy of striving for other men, W.E.B. Du Bois wrote in 1901. While the Freedmen's Bureau was launched as a federal effort to provide support and protection to formerly enslaved that purpose enabled fierce white resistance to undermine the Bureau's effectiveness and ensure that the work of protecting Black freedom would remain an unfulfilled task for years to come. And until we are together again, I love you. I love you. I love you. To be continued.
Revelations.Unveiled.Detroit.